The following is a presentation from the 9th Annual Humanities Days at Montgomery College. The Human in Humanities, Understanding Ourselves and Others. This year we offered 30 remote events via Zoom. To learn more about Humanities Days at Montgomery College and to access other program recordings, please go to this website.
So again, welcome. And in today's program, we will examine the conspiracy theories. Conspiracy theories, the way we are, the impact of conspiracy theories and misinformation on interpersonal relationships during the pandemic. Firstly, we'll examine what we mean by conspiracy theories, misinformation, and disinformation. Then we'll examine interpersonal relationships, what they are, and the conditions under which such relationships develop. Then we'll hear from our guest speaker, Attorney Ivinia Benjamin. We'll also hear from students, their own testimony from their experiences with misinformation. And together, hopefully, we will share some strategies on how to cope with this new reality. But first, to get us off, let us first try to unpack what we mean by fake news and conspiracy theories. Misinformation or fake news, publishing wrong information without meaning to be wrong, having political innuendos, and secondly, disinformation, manipulating and misleading people intentionally to achieve political ends. With that, I'd like to introduce Dr. Osmond Farrell from the Communication Studies Department, who will share with us on interpersonal relationships.
Thank you very much. Dr. LaFoe, can you get my brief PowerPoint on screen, please? Okay, and move it along for me when I indicate, if you don't mind, please.
Yes.
Very well. Well, COVID-19 pandemic has significantly impacted the general lifestyle of people across the globe, including our interpersonal communication. But what do we mean by interpersonal communication? Let's look briefly at the definition. It's two-way communication, close, irreplaceable relationships where we treat each other as unique. Interpersonal communication happens when the people involved talk to and listen to each other. But what do we mean by that? By that, we do not mean, for example, you do not have a close and irreplaceable and unique relationship with, let's say, an Uber driver who comes to pick you up. Maybe over a while, if that's the same Uber driver who comes to pick you up on a daily basis and you develop closer relationship where you share personal information, then it could move from impersonal to interpersonal. But we are talking about people with whom you are intimately connected, so to speak. How does COVID-19 influence communication among family members, friends, co-workers, and others? Well, during this pandemic, even family members are encouraged to stay away from each other. We are restricted from empathizing by hugging, touching, patting on the back, and so on. And then we have to communicate through face mask, which muffles the sound. It impacts our ability to read nonverbal, such as facial expressions, gestures, and all of that. According to Mohammed, 55% of all communication is nonverbal. If a significant amount is impacted and we cannot really respond appropriately because the face mask hide these gestures, then we are not able to communicate as effectively or read people's expression as effectively had we not been using masks. In addition, Sigler and Sigler claims that when nonverbal, such as facial expression, gestures, and so on, accompany our verbal, it's 12 to 13 times more impactful. So we are missing quite a bit, which help us to navigate and understand what other people are trying to communicate. It's not that in the beginning, it was assumed that you had to have face-to-face communication for us to have an interpersonal relationship. Well, the pandemic, among other things, especially technology, have proved that not to be the case. And there are many benefits from online communication. Help us to stay connected. It feels non-threatening. We don't have to worry about looking at the person and all of that stuff. It could be validating. You could praise, you could get likes and all of that stuff. You're the employee of the month, people validate you. It can be paused. In other words, it can be asynchronous at times where you have the ability to come back and make sure whatever you want to send out is properly structured, and then you send it out. But excessive use of online communication has its negative. It can be distracted, fobbing, paying more attention to your phone than the people around you, right? It can feel overwhelming. We are bombarded by this constant stream of information, much of which is fake, conspiracy theory, disinformation, misinformation, and we feel overwhelmed. What I would like to share now are some ways to reduce uncertainty, bring about more closeness, and promote well-being. Well, first of all, show recognition. I cannot tell you how often I'm walking on campus and students bump into me on their phone, so absorbed that they do not even realize where they're going. And I'm sure all of you would have had that experience. However, some of these guys, some of these folks are students who I would be teaching during that semester or would have taught. So I know that they know me, but they never bothered to say hi. Show recognition. If someone sends you a text, especially in these times when they really need support, well, acknowledge them. Acknowledge their thoughts and feelings. Listen to them. Be supportive. And of course, you could get clarity by paraphrasing. Do I understand you to say this? Is this what you meant? Oh, and so on. The highest level of support are confirming messages, because that's what we're doing. Use confirming messages whereby we show them that we value and we appreciate them. We do not use disconfirming messages such as what would deny their value. But the highest level of confirming messages would be to show that you agree. Now, it doesn't mean you have to agree with the entire message that the person is saying. Maybe the person has, had an angry outburst. You do not approve that behavior, but at the same time, you absolutely can understand why they were angry. So in some instances, try to find some area where you can show support. And people actually like people who agree with them, but it doesn't mean that you compromise your credibility by just going along with, let's say, some conspiracy theory or fake news, but try to find a connection at some level. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Farrell. As we've been having a very exciting and interesting morning so far, we will venture into listening now to our guest presenter, Attorney Benjamin. And Attorney Benjamin has been working for many years in I call it the British Department of Anguilla as a magistrate, very apt in the law in the Caribbean. But importantly, she has been the administrator of an online portal called Caribbean Currents. We'll leave it for her to give us a little background of the portal, how it came to be, and how misinformation and disinformation found its way into that portal. I'd encourage you to listen carefully so you can gather all the good information you can so we can have a conversation thereafter.
Thanks for the invitation. It's my privilege to be with you this morning. And I'm looking forward to. All right, so as Dr. Lafont said, I am the administrator of a group chat called Caribbean Current. And it's interesting how it came about. Caribbean Current started in 2017. I was born in the island of Dominica, but I am a resident in Anguilla. And in 2017, we had two major hurricanes affecting the islands. On September the 6th, Anguilla was hit by a Category 5 hurricane. And a week or so later, on September is it September?
5th.
Right. And that hurricane, the hurricane Irma was so powerful that the devices that he used to measure earthquakes or to pick up earthquakes actually picked up the hurricane. It was so powerful. Let's change the screen. All right, so this is a screenshot of the independent newspaper in the UK reporting how powerful Hurricane Irma was going to be and how devastating it was going to be on the islands. And so Hurricane Irma devastated Antigua, St. Martin, Anguilla. And on September 18, but 2 weeks later, Hurricane Maria devastated the island of Dominica. Now, the difference between Irma and Maria is that Maria was a category 5 as well, but the devastation it caused to Dominica was really, it was just not anticipated. And that is because the hurricane sat on the island for 9 hours, battering Dominica by what they refer to as an eye wall. Now, the eye wall of the hurricane is the part of the storm that is the most ferocious outside of the eye of the storm. And it's not a usual thing. It doesn't happen very often. But for some reason, Maria's eye wall battered Dominica for 9 consecutive hours. It just wouldn't move. And at the end of the day, it left the country in shambles. And I remember sitting at my house in Anguilla, even if we had just been hit, but we still had a bit of communication via internet. So I was on my phone monitoring what was happening in Dominica. And I'm seeing that Dominica was trending for the first time on Twitter. And we something trends when there's a spike in the number of tweets on the subject. And people were saying that, you know, it was so unusual that this country was, they weren't sure if that anybody was going to be alive when the eye wall was finished with Dominica. And so everybody was caught unprepared. And after 9 hours, Dominica was cut off from the rest of the world. All communication shut down, no internet, no telephone, all infrastructure was damaged. I mean, I was at home crying because I had never seen that before. And I saw complete strangers on Twitter saying that, you know, this is so strange for this country. So for a few minutes, the entire world was focused on Dominica and what was happening there. At the end of the day, Maria left about 65 people dead, 1.3 billion in damages, and it was just so catastrophic. But the interesting thing is that for 24 hours, there was no communication coming out of Dominica or going into Dominica. So we were all worried about what happened to our family members. And so people came to my house asking whether I had heard information, whether I had heard anything about it. I said, no, I haven't heard anything. And so I had to be calling all over the place, calling my friends in the States. And I thought, you know what, let us start a group chat. It's going to be easier if everybody just posts whatever information they find. And so we can all communicate with each other that way. So we started the group chat and we had about over 220 members. And we were just sharing information on what we would have found out about what happened in Dominica. Immediately upon starting the chat group, the misinformation started. Because don't forget, nothing was coming in, nothing was coming out of Dominica. A few people started to use satellite telephones and started to make contact. And then a radio station in Miami was giving a bit of information. But other than that, there was nothing on the ground. But people immediately started with the misinformation. And one of the things they said was that in a particular village, everybody had died. So, you know, people were panicking. That triggered a wave of panic and a wave of fear among Dominicans living outside of Dominica who wanted information as to whether their family members had survived. And then they started to talk about cars being stolen from dealerships and people were driving cars around the town and looting and causing damage. And in the meantime, this is what Dominica basically looks like. This is the village of Portersville. That's one of the main entrances into the town of Rosa. And so where is it? Where would they have had time to, where would they even be able to drive a car? Nobody could drive a car. But people were talking about people raiding vehicles and driving all over the place, causing mischief. This is what Rosa looks like. This is a Rosa buried in mud. There was no movement, nothing could move. The country was just devastated. So these two images pretty much summed up what the majority of the country looked like. So there was really no place for vehicles to drive. But then a voice clip came out saying that people were driving around, shooting and looting and causing problems in the country. So here we are now worried about what's happening on the island. So we decided that on the chat group, we were going to share information to allow family members to connect with each other. And we wanted the information to be credible. So we had to make sure that whatever I was trying to say to people, whatever you post on the chat had to be credible, because we didn't want the chat to become a rumor mill and to be a place where people trepidation coming out when what they wanted to do was to be, feel a sense of peace and calm about what, was about their family members. So we used the chat for 6 months, and at the end of 6 months, when all communication was restored and Dominica was up and running, we decided that we were going to discontinue the chat. Carry on, the next slide. So we decided that we were going to discontinue the chat. One of the other rumors that they started was that prisoners had escaped from the state prison and that they had cutlasses and that they were terrorizing people in Rosa. They were terrorizing ships that were bringing in the foreign aid to assist in the recovery of the country. People would send up these voice clips, and people would be so emotional about what they were saying, so convincing about what they were saying. And it was just, again, triggering more fear. So I had decided that I would call on a few occasions when the phone line started to open, I would telephone, for example, the Commissioner of Police to find out whether we had an issue of escaped prisoners. And he said, yes, 2 prisoners had escaped, but they had quickly been captured, and there was no issue of anybody brandishing cutlasses. So we tried on Caribbean Current to allay the fears of people. Right, so after 6 months, we thought, let's shut it down. The country has been open. People have been reunited with their family members, and so there was no need to have the chat going. But people thought, you know what, let's keep it open. So we kept it open, and we've been sharing information about issues that's affecting the Caribbean. So currently, we are sharing information on the COVID-19 virus. So who are the people who are on the Caribbean Current platform? When we first started, we had about 226 members, and they were just random people who wanted information about what happened to their family members in Dominica. When we decided to shut down the chat, a few people left, but some people remain. So we have about 100 and something people on the group. And I must say they are really mature people. We have medical doctors, nurses, we have doctoral graduates like psychologists, engineers, economists, lecturers, bankers, lawyers, magistrates, police officers. So we have a group of really level-headed, educated, employed people. We have writers, communication professionals, we have Catholic priests and religious people. So it's a group of mature people. So you would think that because of who is on Caribbean Current, that the misinformation would be reduced. Well, that turned out not to be the case. The first thing that started happening when COVID-19 started in November of 2019 and early 2020, in the early 2020s, people started to confuse the virus, the origin of the virus, and they started saying that it was 5G internet that caused the virus. So there was a whole set of discussion about 5G, and people were just distorting the information. We tried as much as possible I, as the host, would post information from credible sources. If it is not from one of the reputable media houses, I would not post it. But other people didn't think the same. And so when the US election started and President Donald Trump, was running for elections, the whole spirit of the chat changed because there were people on the chat who supported the Republican Party. And we are all Caribbean people, by the way. Everybody on the chat has a Caribbean background, either living in the Caribbean or we have some Caribbean connection. But everything that happens in America impacts the world. People in the Caribbean would debate American issues ferociously as if, we live in America. So when the election started, many people on the chat couldn't vote because we're not from the Caribbean, we're not from America, but people had their views about who they wanted to win the election. And so the chaos erupted because some people supported Donald Trump and some people didn't support Donald Trump. So when he started to speak about the coronavirus and he started to give his views on the origins of the virus and the cure for the virus, I saw a distinct breakdown in civility on that Caribbean current group. So people started to be rude to one another, and people started to, call each other all kinds of names, who supported Donald Trump, who didn't support Donald Trump. But the real war started when the vaccine started to arrive on the island and people had to make a choice to take it or not to take it. Well, let me tell you, that is when I saw three distinct groups of persons on the Caribbean current. You have those who are pro-Donald Trump and against the vaccine, and those who were, and they still are, some of them, for the vaccine. And then you had a group of silent people who said nothing. So we tried, so then the people who supported, who were against the vaccine started posting videos with outrageous claims about the vaccine, about the COVID virus. Now, we're not saying that people have to take the vaccine. We didn't say to anybody that you must take the vaccine. All we're saying is, whether you're supporting vaccine or not, whatever you post on the chat, please let it be from a credible source so that you will not lead anybody astray. So we had a really hard time trying to get people to comply because people were so incensed about what they were thinking. And we realized that the people who were peddling the fake news, they came from a particular category of people. That's what, as administrator, as a person looking on at the posts that were being made, I could tell that certain people were more prone to receiving and to disseminating fake news. And we have two peculiar people on that chat group, one called Irma, one called Arthur, and I will discuss this case of Irma and Arthur in a while. So the common misconception, so people started to post real foolishness, and some of them were like, okay, if you take vitamin C and ginger, then that is enough for you to combat the virus, so don't worry about the vaccine. Or they would say things like, if you take the vaccine, they would post things, videos from people, and usually TikTok videos or YouTube videos from just random people, whether it's a Rastafarian somewhere, whether it's a nurse working with NHS in London, or somebody who claims to be an authority on the subject, also just random people. These people never identify themselves. They never say, some of them never even say like how they got the information. They would just tell you, oh, that's what you should do. So they were saying, if you take the vaccine, you will die in 2 years, that the government was deliberately infecting people for whatever reason. They want to infect people with the vaccine, that there's a spy on you if you allow them to put a microchip in your flesh. They said the vaccine was going to make men impotent and women infertile. They said there's a cure called ivermectin that the government is deliberately withholding from people because they don't want to get you to get a cure for COVID. They said that masks were making people sick, and some people were anti-mask altogether. And you have, they said if you spend time in the sun, that's enough to prevent you from getting infected. The virus has the mark of the beast, and it will poison your blood. So all of that, they were posting consistently on the chat, and they never verified the sources of their information. And it was just uncomfortable for some of us who knew better. We realized that the people who shared the fake news, their interest was to influence like-minded people on the chat group. So we have this person called Arthur, and what he would do, he would contact people behind the scenes. And once he knew that people shared his views, that encouraged him to share more of the fake news. So the case of Irma and Arthur. Irma is a really bright young woman, but she's a writer, but she's disabled. I think she had some condition at birth, and so she's housebound. She moves around with crutches, but she basically is at home. She works from home, basically self-employed, doing little jobs here and there. And then you have Arthur, who's an older gentleman in his 70s, he's retired. And all he does, he belongs to about 3 or 4 chat groups. And all he does is to peddle misinformation all day. So he would take information from misinformation, fake news, and conspiracy theories from one chat group and post it into the next whole day. That's what he would do. Now, Irma is an evangelical Christian. So she believes what her pastor says. If pastor says it, it is true. So she's one of those who would believe what the pastor says. And then we have Anthony and we have Verio. Anthony is a businessman. He lives in the States. He's involved in real estate and he travels a lot. Anthony is one of the people who's really anxious for the virus to get out of his way because it's preventing him from just living his life and from working his businesses. He's had to downsize, I suppose, because of the virus, and it's a problem for him. Verio is a consultant, and it's the same thing as well. If the companies that he's doing consultancies for can't function, then he can't function. So, he wants a cure for this virus. He wants this thing sorted out. So he would try his best to give information as best as he can to help people, to help all of us to eliminate the virus. So the impact of fake news on interpersonal relationships on Caribbean current, what I observed was that when Arthur, Irma, and other people, of course, they were not the only ones posting fake news. There were other people who shared their views posting fake news, but they were the main ones. After a while, I noticed that the cordiality on the group became basically fragmented because the fake news was like a virus in itself. It was infecting people. And after a while, people became really upset with one another and people would lose their cool. I've seen people use phrases, words like monkey, mule, idiot, fool, to describe each other on the chat. And we never did that before. That was never an issue. We always respected each other. But it became so intense that people would begin to use derogatory terms to describe each other on the chat. And I would have to rein people in as the administrator and post the rules, because we have rules for the chat. I would have to post the rules like all over again, so people will be reminded you are not allowed to be libelous, slanderous. You cannot say anything that is, that's offensive to other people. But people just forgot the rules and were just at each other because they each wanted to make their point. Some people expressed that they really hated Arthur. A lot of people behind the scenes would write and say they don't like this man at all. But other people said they loved him and they hated the way that we tried to shut him down. So it's a war that's going on. But I noticed that the conservative people on the chat, especially the evangelicals, they were the ones who were more prone to sharing anti-vax information. As I said, I am not the person to say to you what you should do or what you shouldn't do. All we are saying is whatever you're sharing, please let it be from a credible source. On the island of Anguilla, I observed that the Catholic Church and the Anglican and Methodist churches, they gave information to their people. They told them where the vaccines were going to be administered, how to register and everything. The Seventh-day Adventist Church, they had their doctors come on and explain to their members what the vaccine was about, the pros and the cons. But the other churches, the other evangelical churches, Pentecostals and what have you, they were very hardline and they simply said, no, we are not taking it and we are not allowing our members to take it. And so some of the pastors forbade the people from taking the vaccines. They were very strong-minded. And so the people on the chat whose pastors said they shouldn't take it, well, some of them started to show themselves. They started to show themselves. In the Caribbean, people are God-fearing. If a pastor, a priest, or some religious person speaks, people in the Caribbean will listen. I'm not sure what happens in the States, but in the Caribbean, if the pastor says it, it is gospel. And so, the case of my friend, I have a friend who his name is Leroy. I only calling the names because you do not know the people. So here it is, I have my friend, Leroy, and he has a very strong family. He's very strong, the family is very close-knit. And he's married, he has one daughter. And he kept saying to me that his wife is anti-vax. And I'm like, okay, it's okay, she can decide not to take the vaccine. But he went ahead, he took it, and his wife and daughter wouldn't take it. And it just caused tension in the house. We had a lockdown for about a week or about 2 weeks, about a month. And for the period of time when they were housebound, he said it was like hell. Talking to his wife is like talking to a wall. Suddenly communication broke down and she doesn't want to hear a thing. The year before, they had gone to the States and they had looked at universities that the daughter was interested in attending. So they knew where she wanted to go. And then COVID came, so they had to halt their plans. But suddenly she's saying she doesn't want to study anymore because she doesn't want to take the vaccine. If she has to take the vaccine to go to the United States, she's not taking it. It got so bad that the husband had to vacate the matrimonial home. So when he told me so, I was livid because I know they are strong people and a good family. And I couldn't understand what was causing the breakdown, right? And so the pastor of the wife is very strong-headed on the vaccine, as the mark of the beast and whatever, and she will not take it. And the daughter is prepared not to go to university and forgo her education if she has to take the vaccine. Then I have this friend called Geraldine. Oh my God, talk about a wall. You sit and you talk to Geraldine about anything to do with COVID and she says, that's all, because she knows that has nothing to do with vaccine. As I said, I'm not trying to force anybody to take vaccine, but I'm just trying to say, be open-minded. Listen to both sides, get the credible information. Don't just listen to one source and then close your mind. The people close themselves out shut themselves away from anybody who would give them any information that they think would push them towards vaccine. And you could see the avoidance, you could see they just block you out. Then I have this friend called Francis, he's a pastor. And oh my God, this one, talk about a hardliner. He got to the stage where he said to me that he will never vaccine any of his children in the future. No vaccine at all. All vaccines bad. And only now his eyes open. Only now he realized how bad it was. And then we have the very curious case of Dr. Kevin Smith. Dr. Kevin Smith, and I had a video to show, but obviously I can't share the screen. But Dr. Kevin Smith is a Jamaican national. He has Canadian connections. I think he may have lived in Canada for a while, but he came back and he established a church. Seemed to be very popular. He has videos on YouTube. And he recently, in October, early October, he released a video talking about QR cards in Canada, that the government is going to replace driver's licenses with QR cards. And that if you ever subject yourself to that, you're going to die and the government is going to control you. You won't be able to pay your electricity bill. You won't be able to drive your car. And the way he spoke, it was so terrible. I did my research and I realized the government had been trying to replace driver's licenses with a particular document for people who were entering Canada through the border. They did that since 2019, before the pandemic. They had started putting some process in place for people who are entering via the border. I assume people coming from America into Canada, for the process to be more secure for the Canadian government. But this man and his people found a way to put QR codes, put vaccine, put everything into one, and create a mess in terms of the fear that the video that he put out, and I would have loved to show it to you, but I can't. That video was really frightening. He did that early October. Last Sunday before, about 2 weeks later, he got his church members to come out to church at night, dressed all in white, because he said to them that ark is going to come to take them away. And they had to board the ark. One church member said that when the pandemic started, they used to be sheltering in the church. I suppose when they had the quarantine, they were all in the church and they called the church the ark. So when he said they were the ark, they were going to board the ark, nobody thought anything of it. When they went there in the night, he told them do not walk with your cell phones, no cell phones allowed. He had 144 people who were supposed to board the ark, but these people had to be purified. The blood was tainted. So when they came, what he did, line them up and start slitting their throats. So he slit two people's throats, and then other people started to panic and started to run. So he's now in custody because what he did, he basically was sacrificing them. He had a human sacrifice ritual going on. And he was one of the people in the middle of the COVID-19 pandemic, theory, conspiracy theory, and misinformation, right? And basically was buying the minds of people, and people who get into misinformation, they do not want you to question their authority. They don't want you to question their information. They don't want you to be curious about what they're saying. Don't dig too deep. So we have the conspiracy theories basically costing people their lives. We have the case of Jeffrey Burnham in the United States, who killed his brother, who was a pharmacist, because he claimed that the brother was poisoning people through the vaccine. You have, again, I told you with Dr. Kevin Smith, who killed people, whatever reason. He was afraid that this QR code thing was going to take over the world and whatever. So he was going to take people on an act, take them away. Then we have Scott Apley, and we have this other man in Texas. They were against masks. So they had this whole crusade, anti-mask crusade. And both of them end up dying from COVID virus. Caleb Wallace and Scott Apley. Caleb Wallace left a young family behind, a wife, I think 5 or so young children behind, all because he would not accept that the mask is part of the protocol that you need to engage in if you want to prevent infections. So the effect that this thing has is really, it's costing people their lives. It is causing separation and division in families. A lot of bullying and violence is happening. A decrease in communication, families avoid each other, quarrels, right? I said I saw it firsthand on Caribbean Current. Now, what I discovered when I was infected with COVID-19, I contracted COVID-19 while traveling. Somehow I posted on the chat quite accidentally that I was infected. It was not my intention to do that, but it came out because I was sending a message to somebody else, and it ended up on the chat. When I discovered I was infected, people on the chat were quite sympathetic and sent messages in open chat as well as behind the scenes. But do you know that the major conspiracy people on the chat never said a word? Arthur said nothing. The evangelical Christians who were supposed to be loving and Christ-centered people said nothing. And I realized that we have a problem. We've really lost our humanity. We don't, even if I do not share your views, it doesn't mean that you cannot be sympathetic to me because I'm suffering, I'm going for a situation. So I realized that things had gotten really terrible on the chat to the extent where we couldn't sympathize with each other. And I realized that I said, you know what? Anyway, there was something else that I posted about how to avoid, you need to be able to stop fake news and conspiracy theories. You can avoid it. You can avoid it by one, spotting fake news. Ask questions. So Dr. Richard Barr, he's a senior lecturer at University of Derby, and he says that because everybody has access to YouTube, we can all make videos on our cell phones, and we can all send videos out. We're all journalists, basically. But what the fake news is doing is tarnishing the world of journalism. And he's saying that you have to be careful where you choose to get information from, and you must develop a critical mindset. You have to be able to evaluate things for yourself. Be curious, ask questions. As a lawyer, people always try to tell me, if I try to dig deep into a situation, people tell me, who do you think you're talking to? You think I'm in the court with you? You think I'm in the defender's dock? I'm not in the bank, I'm not on the dock, don't ask me questions. And I realize people do not want to be questioned. They don't want facts. People don't want truth. People like salaciousness. We like anything that is flamboyant. People love that. They don't want to go down into the facts. So you need to be able to question the source of the information. Ask people, what are you saying? Where did you get that from? Question the authenticity of certain information that you received. And Dr. William Van Gordon, he says that what you can do, you can stop fake news by one, you have to consider whether the information has a named reliable source. Think about what might be missing from the story. Fake news leaves information, usually leaves critical information out. Double check whether the quotes that are attributed or mentioned in whatever story is attributed to a particular person or group. ask the questions, look for fake images. If it is fake news, it very well may include fake stories because they mix and they blend and they add and they subtract and they just create a whole mess so that they can lead you astray. So learn how to fact check things. Don't just grab and go. Take your computer, Google, read, and you will find interesting things. There are so many people out there who thrive on fake news. I don't know why they do it. For example, there's a group that says Nelson Mandela died in the 1980s. And people believe it. Nelson Mandela was freed in 1990 from prison. He went on to become the president of South Africa, the first Black president. He died in 2013. But there's a big group out there who believe that he died in the 1980s. And people just do not question. I don't know why. But please, as young people, as students, be curious. Spend your time researching, whatever your position is, research it so that you will not lead yourself astray. And if you suspect something is fake, please do not pass it on. Let it stop with you. All right, so thanks for inviting me. And that's the end of the presentation.
Well, I just want to say thank you, Dr. Benjamin, for that awesome presentation. I know I really enjoyed it. Now, does anyone have any questions for Dr. Benjamin?
No, it's just Miss Benjamin. I'm not a doctor here. Doctor is the other.
Okay,
Benjamin.
I'm sorry. Okay, I'm sorry. Does anyone have any questions for?
So my question, this is where I get stuck, is I have a family member who believes that the mainstream media and that researchers and scientists and CDC and FDA can't be trusted, and that her research is somehow superior because she's not leaning on those sources. And I'm just wondering, that's where we get stuck. It's like a bad, and I'm just wondering if there's any suggestions that you might have.
Well, that is the problem we have all over. Everybody is suddenly questioning doctors, politicians, everybody's suspicious of everybody all of a sudden. And it's very difficult, I'm telling you, it's a very difficult thing to do, to undo that kind of mindset. And what I have thought, what I have started to do was basically to back away a bit and let people experience things for themselves. Because you can only say so much. You can only present them with that much information. And if they're refusing to acknowledge, after a while, you just have to just be quiet, pray, say a prayer for them, and hope that they will understand. Because what started to happen was that some of the people who believed, the anti-mask people, who, when they saw the people with anti-maskers were dying, they started to change their mindset. They started to rethink their position. So sometimes you have to let people look at other people close to them going through certain things, and so that they can realize that they need to check themselves. Mm-hmm. So that's the only thing I can say to you, because you can't keep pounding them. They will resist. Every time you pound, they're going to resist. So you have to pull back at some point in time.
Yeah. And actually that's been my way of doing it. I just worry that it's going to be something where my grandchildren might get sick or she might get sick. And so it's a hard place, but that makes a lot of sense.
No, I was saying, I think that is a great question. Does anyone else have any more questions?
Out of respect for the schedule, we'd like to, if you have no more questions, burning issues, we'd like to thank every one of you for being on this panel this morning, particularly thank Professor Osmond Benjamin Farrell of our Communication Studies Department, and most importantly, our guest presenter, Attorney Ivinia Benjamin. We hope that this information has been useful for you in the world of the student world, as well as the Montgomery College community. And we thank you for your patience with us this morning. Do have yourself a great rest of the day and a wonderful rest of Humanities Days here at Montgomery College. Thank you very much.